Welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to dive into something I find just absolutely fascinating. We're looking at the unexpected artistry, the vibrant culture, and honestly, the sheer undeniable necessity behind low-spec gaming optimization. We always hear about the latest, beefiest graphics cards, right? And those insanely demanding games designed to push them to their absolute limits. But what about the other end of the spectrum? What about the millions of us trying to run these massive digital behemoths on, well, older, way less capable machines? Today we're going to explore how developing for lower spec hardware isn't just some backup plan. It's a unique craft, a total technical marvel, and honestly, a super crucial movement for the whole future of the medium.
Okay, let's dive into this. If you've glanced at the system requirements for any major release lately, you've probably felt like modern gaming has kind of turned into this highly exclusive club. As PC Gamer recently pointed out, there's this growing consensus that, quote, all the AAA makers are basically just aiming for the highest spec PCs. The assumption is pretty much, if you're willing to shell out premium cash for a new game, you probably already have a premium gaming setup. It takes a ton of time, money, and effort to make these games look spectacular on those top-tier machines, so optimizing for lower specs? Yeah, that's seemingly plummeted down the priority list.
But man, this raises a massive dilemma. What happens when the newest, most culturally relevant games demand hardware you simply can't buy? Or, let's be real, hardware you just can't afford? This question totally sets the stage for this amazing underdog narrative. We aren't just talking about a minor inconvenience here. We're talking about a scenario where ultra-broke gamers, or really just everyday people trying to get by with older laptops, desperately need a lifeboat to stay connected to the gaming world. And to truly understand why this lifeboat became so incredibly critical, we need to rewind a bit to a recent historical event that basically shook the entire tech world.
Section 1. The Modern Hardware Crisis. So, back in 2021, an absolute perfect storm broke out. And according to data from Accenture, it was driven by three main things. First off, skyrocketing demand. Because, remote work and at-home entertainment became the new normal, so the need for consumer electronics just boomed, literally went off the charts. Second, we hit these severe manufacturing bottlenecks. You see, semiconductors aren't just whipped up overnight. They actually have a typical production lead time of about 18 weeks. And finally, the third factor, massive logistics constraints.
And this brilliantly illustrates the physical reality of that logistics nightmare. It was stark. Global air cargo capacity actually dropped by a staggering 20% in 2020. I mean, think about that. With fewer flights, closed airways, and the space that was available being completely taken up by essential medical shipments, the chips that were actually being made, they simply couldn't get to where they needed to go. This wasn't just some abstract corporate supply chain issue, this directly hit everyday gamers. Trying to upgrade your PC with new components became pretty much impossible, and if you could find them, the prices were just prohibitively expensive.
Now, this hardware crisis violently clashed with the soaring technical demands of brand new games. Take a gorgeous game like Alan Wake 2, for example. It relies super heavily on a new rendering pipeline using mesh shaders through DirectX 12 Ultimate. And because of that, it actively locks out GPUs that are, say, 7 years old, like the GTX 10 series. But then, on the flip side of all this, you have what the community affectionately calls potato mode. This is a totally scrappy, stripped-down ethos where visual features and texture qualities are severely cut back for one simple reason, just to make the game playable. Now, some modern engines, like Capcom's RE engine, actually scale down really well, but in a lot of AAA games, this lower-end reality is just straight-up ignored.
Section 2. The Roots of Low-End.
If we're going to talk about the history of low-end gaming, we absolutely have to talk about integrated graphics. Back in 2004, Intel rolled out the Graphics Media Accelerator, or the GMA series. These chips were integrated directly onto the motherboard, mostly targeting budget laptops and everyday business computers. And guys, they were so notoriously slow for playing actual video games that the community playfully, and yeah, maybe a bit derogatorily, dubbed them the Graphics Media Decelerator. It was precisely this kind of highly restrictive hardware that forced players to get incredibly creative if they wanted to play literally anything released in the 21st century.
And you know what? That necessity spawned an amazingly vibrant DIY culture. Over on forums and communities like Reddit's r/lowend gaming, tweaking game files so they'd run on a literal potato became a massive badge of honor. You'd see players getting totally nostalgic, asking about legendary figures like Low Spec Gamer. These folks were basically lifeboats for ultra-broke gamers, doing the seemingly impossible, getting massive AAA titles to run on ultra-low-end machines by making extreme, almost comical sacrifices in visual fidelity. It was this entire community of survival, basically ensuring that a lack of cash didn't lock you out of the current gaming zeitgeist.
Section 3. The Tech of Potato Mode. Let's define our terms real quick so we're all on the same page. A potato mode isn't just going into the menu and turning the settings to low. It's effectively a visual kill switch. It's a graphics option that severely cuts back image quality to help the least powerful, absolute cheapest rigs run an otherwise crazy demanding PC game. It's a mode so incredibly easy to run, you could theoretically run it on a potato. And here's the thing. Actually implementing this takes real, active development effort. You don't just flip a magical switch to make a massive 100-gigabyte game scale down without completely breaking it.
So the crucial point is, the actual computer science behind this is rigorous. According to a research paper published in the International Journal of Science, Engineering, and Technology, optimizing 3D character creation for lower-end performance relies on a few core techniques. First up is retopology. This is the super careful art of reducing a model's polygon count while somehow still maintaining its recognizable silhouette. Second is normal map baking. This is a brilliant little trick where you capture all the complex lighting details of a high-poly model and essentially paint them onto the low-poly version to fake the depth. It's like an optical illusion. And third is texture atlasing. This combines multiple textures into just one file to minimize the computational draw calls the processor has to make.
To put some hard data to this, the research explicitly notes a strict rule of thumb for low-spec optimization. To make sure you get peak performance on heavily constrained devices, like say mobile phones, character models should be kept strictly under 10,000 polygons. Now for some context here, modern AAA game characters, they can easily have over 100,000 polygons. So condensing all of that down to under 10K without the character looking like a blurry, blocky mess, that requires an immense amount of skill.
Honestly, seeing these specific techniques outlined in a formal academic journal like IJSet really validates what the whole potato mode community has been doing in the trenches for years. Tailoring and optimizing games for leaner PCs isn't just some hacky workaround. It is an incredible, highly technical, and honestly super overlooked feat of engineering. It demands just as much craft and brainpower as capitalizing on the latest, most expensive rendering techniques.
Section 4. The Art of Demaking.
While potato modes try to squeeze big modern games onto older PCs, there's this amazing parallel movement known as demaking. Demaking is this quietly subversive practice of remaking a modern game to run, or at least look like it's running, on much older, entirely obsolete hardware. As Eurogamer pointed out, this practice actually challenges the whole AAA industry's obsession with the cutting edge. It forces us to pause and think about video game projects as something more than just expressions of pure brute force technological power. The extremes of this community are just mind-blowing. I mean, you have developers accomplishing absolute technological moonshots, like literally porting the 3D shooter Quake to a World War II-era oscilloscope. No way, right? Then you have what I'd call the spiritual home of demaking, the Pico 8. The Pico 8 is this digital fantasy console that's completely based on 1980s hardware limitations. We're talking a tiny 128 by 128 pixel display and a brutally strict 16-color palette. And yet, developers actively choose to build original games and demakes within these incredibly harsh constraints.
Let's move to and see how this builds into a much deeper philosophy. Software developer Paul Nicholas notes that the Pico 8 is a great platform specifically because it forces you to compromise. Think about it. When you reimagine a complex, sprawling modern game for a tiny 128-pixel screen, you have to isolate the absolute core mechanics. You have to figure out what truly makes the game fun. Severe technical constraints don't stifle creativity, they demand it. It makes the artistic choices that actually make up a game highly visible and interrogable.
Section 5. Why low spec matters. So, what does this all mean? What should you actually take away from all this? And why does this underdog movement matter? Well, first, there's environmental sustainability. The endless cycle of hardware obsolescence creates massive waste and demands huge amounts of power. Supporting older hardware is, for sure, simply more sustainable. Second, there's broader inclusivity. Designing for low spec ensures that gaming remains accessible to people who simply cannot afford to drop $1,000 on a new graphics card every few years. It keeps the medium open to everyone. And finally, it's an incredible artistic challenge. It is a wildly unique technical art form that demands sheer, unfiltered ingenuity. Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. With AAA studios laser-focused on pushing millions of polygons through ultra-expensive graphics cards, we really have to ask ourselves, is the endless arms race for cutting-edge graphics making us lose sight of the true art of game design? Because whether it's an ultra-broke gamer tweaking config files, an engineer carefully baking normal maps to hit a 10K polygon limit, or an artist lovingly demaking a modern hit into 16 colors, the Potato PC absolutely proves that limitations are very often the birthplace of true innovation. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what's on your screen.